Black people.
Why are we all of a sudden having crisis in identity? At the very moment, we also talked about what? Afrocentrism and African what? Centeredness. So right at this moment, when we are beginning to coalesce and to develop a concept of African identity and Afrocentrism, we are all now suddenly in a what? Identity crisis. Is the identity crisis really there? Or is what going on an attempt to do what? Create an identity crisis. Because these people are well aware of what a full and wholesome identity will do to them. And they are aware that an African-centered identity represents the end of white power and of white oppression.
Kush Communiversity is brought to you by our amazing sponsor, The Black Secret. Are you ready to dive deep into Black history, economics, wealth building, and self-empowerment? The Black Secret is offering exclusive courses by none other than the Black history man himself, Robin Walker. This is the most powerful Black studies course on offer for the entire Black world. And guess what? You can get started today by simply using our special link, which you can find in the video description. Be sure to apply our coupon code Kimbunga to get another 20% off your membership. And there's more! Want to get a taste of what the Black Secret has to offer? You can also claim the book 100 Black History Facts absolutely free. Link in the description. So what are you waiting for? Expand your mind, unlock a world of knowledge, claim your free book, and let the Black Secret guide you on a journey of discovery and empowerment.
Click on the link below or subscribe to get more information. Class is in session.
Peace, peace. Greetings, everybody out there. Abiba Fahodie and Abiba Tumi. Of course, we start off with those words because they represent African liberation and Black power. With that, I'd like to welcome everybody to
Sorry, Chief. 1 second, Chief. It appears that your sound is gone. Mic check. Hold on a second. Yes, King, your sound appears to be gone. So we're gonna have to sort that out. All right, but brothers and sisters, greetings and welcome to another in our Afrikan Survival Initiative Roundtable series. We're there, and so it's going to get serious right about now because we are here discussing U.S. foreign policy, brothers and sisters. And our brother Sam P.K. Collins is going to be here ready and rearing to go. And so, you know how these things go sometimes, kings and queens, you just got to work with it, work with it, yeah. But we're going to get Chief for the back, you know what I'm saying, the revolutionary man, sir. All right, we got you back now. Yes. So yeah. Go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, man. So I'm not sure if you could hear me last time. What I was saying, I was talking my face off. But I was welcoming everybody out there to this third Kimbunga media, Jicho La Kimbunga collaboration, where we've been organizing these Afrikan Survival Initiatives, particularly leading up to this next U.S. election. We've been analyzing relationship and policy related to the Black community within the United States. We've also talked about Project 2025 and beyond. And today we'll be talking about the U.S.A, foreign policy, and the Black world. We're talking about the relationship beyond the United States of America. And the reason why we're doing this is because we took on the responsibility to spread this information, to host these roundtable discussions, to provoke thought as our people go back into this every 4-year process of electing whoever is going to be selected. You know how that goes. But we're here to have a fruitful conversation, and we don't go too far without our elders. And so the first thing I want to do is bring out one of our very powerful elders in the Black liberation struggle today, Brother P.G. Achille Nkrumah, straight out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to bless this current event and also call our ancestors near. Thank you.
Hotep family, I'm always honored to have the opportunity to bring forth the elders and bring forth the ancestors as we move forward. So with that being said, we are going to call the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. No way we start this without him, without Amy Jacobs Garvey, Amy Ashwood Garvey. We have to call on them. Wanoko Rashidi. We have to call and bring them into play. Brother Malcolm X, one of the steadfast, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba. We absolutely have to have them and bring them into the fold. Julius Nyerere. We have to do this, because in doing this, we know that we're standing with them and they are standing with us. Marcus Garvey said, look for me in the whirlwind. I will be the real Marcus Garvey. So that's that spirit. We also ask you to bring your own ancestral images into this meeting. So I'm going to bring my mother, father, my grandfather, my grandmother. I'm going to bring my aunt and uncle. I'm going to bring those that have left to be a part of this. And I say that to say this: it is how we move forward, all in one. Life is ever going, but while we're here, we have a job to do. It is to free Africa, one God, one aim, one destiny.
Right on, right on. So hopefully everybody can hear me. My mic is on. Shout out to PG for blessing us with that. And, you know, with no further ado, we typically would bring out our presenter, but our presenter is running a little late. He'll be here momentarily. And until then, we're just going to have a good conversation and talk about some, you know, a few things that, you know, our people need to be discussing at the time. Maybe I can bring out PG and bring out Baba Senghor. We can chop it up with Brother Abib. These are the panelists for the day. We're going to do a little different today. We're going to start off just having a good old conversation till our brother Sam get here to give us the presentation. How y'all doing? Peace, brothers.
Peace, brothers.
Yeah, Hotepu.
Peace, peace.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. So I'm thinking that even though Brother Sam is going to come and give us the presentation, we can have some of this conversation right now.
Yes, sir.
For sure. Because
we are part of the presentation. We're part of the presentation. Sam gonna give us one piece, but we're part of this. And one of the things people need to understand, and people need to understand how America has moved throughout the world and how we got to where we are. And many times we have conversations and we don't talk about how you got here. And I'm not talking about slavery, because that we talk about. But I don't even call it slavery. I call it forced incarceration. They stole us and put us in prison and forced us to work for free. And they ain't going to give us no money. But that's all right. We're going to get our freedom back. That's the plan. But this man has destabilized the world for his own selfish interest. Now, I know all life started in Africa. I'm going to give you that. That means they are part of us. But that's the part that we got to fix. And until we fix it, I ain't claiming it.
I heard that, PG. I just want to say, too, man, we coming out of a big week, Friends of the Congo. I want to remind people that the Congo is one of the most resourceful nation states on the continent of Africa. And the policies that the American government and all the Yoruba governments, all the white European, Euro-Asian governments of the world have been exploiting our resources continuously in the Congo, but all over Africa and all over the world. But today we're going to talk about foreign policy, the policies that exist with these multinational corporations that continue to expropriate our resources from our land in the Congo. We would not even be probably doing this StreamYard and Zoom, you know, without the technology and the things, the resources that come from the Congo. So what we need to do as African people is to wake up and begin to block Yoruba and these foreign corporations from stealing our resources, like the PG just said, and stealing us from the motherland. So they're a bunch of thieves. And so what do you do with thieves like that? Is you, like the PG say, you correct them. We scold them, we discipline them. But first, we also got to rebuild ourselves. And we got to say, send this message to all of our Africans all over the world, but particularly on the continent. We got to take it back. Y'all don't need to come out of Africa. Let's plan and work to take it back. Ain't nothing out here for you. Don't be coming to North America. Don't be coming to Europe and thinking you're going to get some kind of treatment, because we black people who were taken against our will, we ain't getting the right kind of treatment here either. So Africa has got to be taken back, and then we take our sovereignty back and to move forward. So I just wanted to start the conversation with that. I'm gonna let my brother Abib take it from there, because those elders, we ain't tired yet. And we following our ancestors, but we know the youth are the truth, and we moving forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to piggyback off of that, really, I think it's important that we know, what's in the best interest of the American government and for a lot of these European governments as well. What are they doing and why are they doing it? Right. I think it's important to really break down when we talk about systems, how these systems are actually set up and how these different African countries or Caribbean countries are actually affected by that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to digging deeper into the conversation and really getting to the root of the issue.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. If I'm not mistaken, brother Sam PK Collins is here among us. So what I want to do is I want to give him the stage because he's going to set the stage for the conversation that's going to follow. But I'm excited. I'm looking forward as well. Baba Senghor, when you talk about the Congo, my body began to rise because it's like, they gave us a Hollywood movie about Wakanda, but we got a real Congo, and I'm not Killmonger, but I feel the same way coming from the diaspora. Like, I got rights here too. It's not just the people in the Congo's resources you taking my resources too. The resources that can employ my child, the resources that can employ me and replenish my life. So it's very personal. What's happening in Africa is very personal for every African, no matter where you are. It has to be. So yes, so we're going to dive in. We're going to dive in. We're going to dive in later. But Brother Shakara, can you bring Sam PK Collins out? We can welcome him to the panel and then leave him here for a presentation.
Big brother,
bro, what's up?
Some blessings. Some blessings. How's it going?
Welcome,
good to see you.
Welcome. We ready for some fire, right?
You,
oh yeah, I got a little bit for y'all. I got a little bit. You can. Advance warning. I'm doing my best, but you can only scratch the surface of what the U.S. government's doing abroad. But I covered quite a lot of ground, so I'm very excited to present what I have this today.
As excited as we all can have it.
With no further ado, man, you take it away. We're there with you, bro.
My man.
Wait for you backstage. Peace.
My man. Peace. Peace and blessings, family. Sam PK Collins in the building, representing Banneker City. I'm a grassroots journalist, educator, and an author. This is my third presentation on Kimbunga Media as a part of our Project 2025 initiative. So a little bit of background about what we've done so far. The last presentation 2 weeks ago touched on the U.S. government versus Black people. I would say it has set the tone for today's presentation. Before the second presentation, during the latter part of September, we actually covered Project 2025, and we uncovered it as a project that has been around since the Reagan administration. So sort of debunking a lot of the left-wing talking points about Trump bringing it into office and the Heritage Foundation. So I always go back to these presentations, just keeping in mind what the late, great George Jackson told us about fascism still being alive in this time. And again, just reiterating that we are looking at these issues from a Garveyite perspective. That perspective, as you'll see in the presentation, being one of race first, nationhood, and identification with Africans all across the continent. So I'm not coming to you as a U.S. citizen, even though my passport may say I am, but I'm coming to you as a universal African nationalist who is very, very cognizant of what the U.S. government has been able to do and continues to do, all in the name of advancing their agenda. So without further ado, I'm going to give you this presentation. And like I was telling the panel, it scratches the surface, but it's my hope and desire that it gives us a little bit to chew on. So once again, this is the Garveyite analysis, looking at U.S.A., foreign policy, and the Black world, looking all around the world. There is a focus on the Caribbean and the African continent. So I looked at this in a very interesting way. I'm weighing in on my experiences as a first-generation American of Liberian descent. So I decided that since we focused on domestic affairs 2 weeks ago, that we should start with the U.S. Black immigrant population and look at how their migration to the United States aligns with what has taken place in their home nations over the course of several decades. And when I say several decades, I really mean the post-colonial era, where we went from regular colonialism, as Kwame Nkrumah and his contemporaries knew it, and we went into neo-colonialism. So during that period of time, you saw a lot of destabilization. You saw the Cold War in effect, and you saw the holdovers and residue from the colonial era, where newly so-called sovereign countries were attempting to gain their footing, but they were unable to because there were ethnic disputes that the U.S. and other powers were leveraging and taking advantage of to carry on their proxy wars. So the Garveyite analysis, one more time, for those who didn't hear me, it is a race-first analysis. So we are looking at this purely from the standpoint in which the African woman and man and child can benefit. So we're looking at how the U.S. has marginalized Black people in the trenches domestically, but as far as today, internationally. Who is a Garveyite? According to the late, great Tony Martin, one of our noble ancestors, a Garveyite espouses three principles: race first, self-reliance, and nationhood. So this self-reliance piece is very, very important. I will explain more as we go on. All right, forgive the small type. I thought I would set the stage by comparing Vice President Kamala Harris's foreign policy versus that of former President Donald Trump. So we have two candidates here, two mainstream candidates, and I just want to acknowledge the independent candidates, of which there are many. None of them have gained 5% to be put on the national stage, but you know, there are more candidates out there than Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. But as far as their foreign policy, starting with Trump, we saw from 2017 to 2021, he advanced an American nationalist agenda. He talked about lack of intervention, and he talked about protecting American interests first. And we saw that with the way that he treated the U.S.A.'s NATO colleagues in terms of asking them to bring in their fair share in, to protect NATO's interests. And we saw earlier this year that the Biden administration had to do a reset with NATO in that regard. Also, during the Trump administration, President Trump, that time, he called Haiti and he called African nations as whole countries. And he had a strong anti-immigrant stance, as we know. He supports Palestinian annihilation. And he recently told Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, he told him, do what you have to do. Trump's ultimate goal is to turn Gaza into a resort city, whatever that means. The Trump Department of Defense ramped up anti-drug efforts via Navy destroyers and small combat ships in the Caribbean. And analysts predict that African leaders who play to Trump's ego, should he win another presidency, will be the most successful in the Trump presidency. So as it relates to Vice President Kamala Harris, we look at or we give predictions on what she's able to do or what she will do based on how she has performed during the Biden administration and what she has said during debates. So Kamala Harris as vice president, unbeknownst to many, has really assumed the position as the U.S.A.'s top diplomat, or Africa's top diplomat. Coming out of the U.S.-Africa Summit, she traveled throughout the African continent to promote clean energy, protection of democracy, and clean energy and protection of democracy primarily. She also visited countries pretty much twisting their hand on the LGBTQ issue, ensuring that if their legislators did not vote in that direction, that the head of state did so as well. And we saw some contention around that in Ghana. Kamala Harris, while she's not as quote unquote extreme as Donald Trump, she says she supports Israel's right to self-defense, and she also supports a two-state solution, which is very, very asinine to this analyst because there's only one state, the state that was there before the Balfour Declaration. So how can it be a two-state solution? Through the Biden administration, Vice President Kamala Harris has facilitated the largest deployment of border agents, and she also, through the administration, issued a temporary suspension of asylum for migrants who've crossed the border without documentation. And it's not just Mexican migrants as of late who have been crossing the border, it has also been Haitian migrants. I don't know if you guys recall, there were pictures that surfaced a couple years ago, border agents on horses whipping Haitian migrants coming into the country. So a lot of inequities being perpetuated. We see the U.S. destabilizing countries on the outside, forcing people to come into the country. Then once they come into the country or attempt to do so, they are being ostracized. So as far as Haiti is concerned, the Biden administration, of which Kamala Harris is a part, started deporting Haitians back to their home country. And this happened amid an increase in Haitian and Venezuelan immigration. Next slide, please. And before I move on to that, I do want to bring up Russia and China. The Biden administration, even though it deviated from the Trump administration's deeds, right, during that time, it did maintain policies that, in a sense, kept America first, because America is always going to keep itself first, but it did recognize to what some people have described within the Biden administration, increased aggression from Russia and from China. So there are concerns, and there are also talks about how the Trump mandates and the Trump ethos, in a sense, has kept the U.S. behind in gaining a stronghold on the African continent, which will lead to future slides. So when we're talking about the immigrant population, we're talking about the continent in particular, we're talking about attempts by the Biden administration to gain a stronghold on the continent as China and Russia in particular are coming in and making themselves known. We're on the next slide right now that deals with the immigrant landscape. Again, I'm coming at you as a first generation, quote unquote, American. But we have today Black immigrants accounting for 10% of the U.S. Black population and 10% of the U.S. immigrant population. So we're looking at, as it relates to Black people, Black immigrants, people who immigrated from majority Black countries and are Black, or of African descent. They account for 4.7 million people in the United States, because the Black population as of late, as I saw in my research, is 47 million, give or take. So we're looking at 4.7 million Black immigrants. In the U.S. Black community, 9% of U.S. born Black people have at least one foreign born Black parent. More than half of the U.S. Black immigrant population arrived after 2000, mostly from the African continent. And we saw that during the 1980s, 1970s, a greater part of the 20th century, Caribbeans accounted for a sizable portion of the U.S. Black immigrant population. And those are remnants of the Monroe Doctrine, which pretty much, created this atmosphere where the United States had first dibs on Caribbean countries. But we can talk a little bit more about that. The top countries of origin for Black immigrants as of today are Jamaica, Haiti, Nigeria, Ethiopia, the DR, Dominican Republic, Ghana, Trinidad and Tobago, Kenya, Guyana, and Somalia. And we'll talk about a couple of these countries later on in the slide, but just to let you know, that's where the majority of our Black immigrants are coming from as of late. So what spurred continental African immigration to the U.S.? We can't look any further than the Cold War and the post-colonial era as it relates to the United States relationship with newly sovereign African countries. The U.S. government, according to James Merriweather, they wanted to take a middle-of-the-road approach. So supporting, in quotes, supporting African independence while assuring European nations that their interest on the continent would remain intact. And with neocolonialism, that usually happens through puppet leaders, of which the late, great Patrice Lumumba was not. But puppet leadership, control of resources, and Military intervention and presence are all parts of the ingredients to maintain U.S. influence on the African continent and keep former European colonizers at peace or at ease with African independence, because African independence is really a misnomer. There are no control of the resources by Africans. So as such, colonization is still the menu for the day. The original goal was to stop communism, and Africa was the final battleground for that. So we have Liberia suffering as a result of that, as well as the Congo, Somalia, Angola, South Africa, and Namibia. As it relates to Liberia, the 1980 coup that took William Tolbert out of office was the one came amid Liberia really embracing the Soviets and embracing the People's Republic of China, much to the chagrin of the U.S. government, which had depended on Liberia as an ally since recognizing Liberia's sovereignty during the Reconstruction era. So up until 1980 or so, Liberia was a very strong ally of the United States. And once William Tolbert started deviating from his predecessor's MO, his predecessor being William Tubman, then that's when the United States started taking notice. We're talking about a country on the west coast of Africa that was a base for U.S. ships and U.S. planes during World War II. We're talking about a country that kicked out German diplomats and German service people on behalf of the United States during World War II. We're talking about a country that had a radio station installed by the United States, as well as a relationship with the Firestone Tire Company, who I don't patronize. You know, the Firestone Company put in there during the 1930s, all because Liberia had debt, and the U.S. took on Liberia's debt in exchange for control of the government, which to an extent happens to this day in the post-Civil War era of Liberia. As it relates to the Congo, once again, Patrice Lumumba, overstanding that the resources are the key to independence and sovereignty. So once Eisenhower and other parties took out, it was Eisenhower or Kennedy. It was Eisenhower. If I'm incorrect, please correct me. But Eisenhower, once his government, once his FBI or CIA rather, collaborated to take out Patrice Lumumba, that entire area went into destabilization that we see to this day. We're talking about an area that is rich in natural minerals and in forestry. You know, we talked about the African continent being a place where everybody's looking for resources. The Congo is where it's at right now. And it all led back to the destabilization of that region within the 6 months of Patrice Lumumba's presidency. And they used the black man to get him too. So let's talk about it. Angola was a battleground for let's go back one more slide if you don't mind. Angola was a battleground for the Cold War, seeing as the Russians had set up shop there during the Cold War, and the U.S. was very, very on edge about that. And South Africa and Namibia as well, you know, as it relates to border disputes. So, and, you know, a bigger point I want to bring up as it relates to Namibia and South Africa, that is one example of how the colonial borders were always an issue. And with the formation of the OAU, because they did not adhere to Kwame Nkrumah's mandate for United Africa, the OAU was not really effective. It was a bit more effective than the African Union is today, but it still was not effective in deploying military troops to countries where conflicts took place. Instead, they relied on these new countries to handle disputes by themselves. But had they been politically unified, then a politically unified body would have been able to counter a lot of what the U.S. government and its allies have been able to accomplish across the continent. That is what we call balkanization, taking out states one by one. But had they been unified politically, that would have not been the case. And one more point I want to bring up. The French, right? The French, people talk about the U.S., but the French, they're just as dirtier. They're just as dirty. Had it not been for the Francophone nations, right, as well as Liberia and Ethiopia, sorry to say, then the United States of Africa would have been realized. The Brazzaville states, also known as the Francophone countries, they had set up their own conglomerate, just having been wary of French interference in this plot and just being wary of what aligning with Kwame Nkrumah would have done, pretty much. So we see here the first example coming out of, you know, the post-colonial era of African leaders prioritizing themselves and their well-being over that of the people. So even abroad, we have black people in positions of power going against the grain in a way that hurts the whole collective. That is not the Garveyite way. Next slide, please. So what spurred Caribbean African immigration to the United States? During the Cold War, the U.S. had its attention on Cuba, of course. To this day, a trade embargo is still in place to some degree. Obama did try to, do his best to alleviate that a bit, but he did that alongside with upping the reward for our dear Queen Mother Assata Shakur's extradition back to the United States. So, none of them are good to some extent. And as it relates to Cuba, the United States at one point, interestingly, wanted to use Trinidad and Tobago as a trump card. They were mulling the possibility of bombing Trinidad and Tobago and blaming it on Cuba as a way of legitimizing their campaign against Cuba, which started during the Cold War and the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, when the Russians had set up missiles on the Cuban island and the United States tried to retaliate, but they did not. Since Haitian independence, the U.S. government has intervened several times, deposing heads of state and creating new governments. That is also how the Dominican Republic came into existence. The DR, right next to Haiti on that island, was created as a way of rebuffing Haiti's sovereignty and power. Haiti still remains as the poorest country on the Western Hemisphere, if not in the world, because of what the United States has been able to do for decades, for centuries, and they did that with the DR's help. They continue to do that with the help of other countries. As you'll see later, even Kenya has jumped into the fold, dispatching a police force on the ground to interfere once again in Haitian affairs that the United States had warped a long, long time ago. As it relates to Jamaica, Jamaica has become one of the U.S.'s closest allies. We see a big Jamaican population here in the United States. Jamaica, as far as the Caribbean is concerned, is one of the more popular, more well-known countries. The United States, by keeping Jamaica close, has been able to help Jamaica solidify its tourism industry. But even with that, my understanding is that Jamaicans are not able to enjoy that industry. In fact, it has been multinational corporations, and as of late, it has been the Chinese that have infiltrated that industry. But I digress. So as far as the United States and Jamaica, as Jamaica has gotten help in its tourism and in selling its natural resource of bauxite, there were tensions on the island during the 1970s between capitalists and communists that showed up in the presidential election that turned pretty violent. So we see that even among U.S. allies, and has always been the case, people on that country continue to suffer. And going back as far as Papa Garvey's time, his travels around the Caribbean and even, across Europe has shown him the collective state of Black affairs, where Black people are at the bottom of the totem pole. And Black people's position at the bottom of the totem pole goes back way further than that time to what I mentioned as the Monroe Doctrine, through which the United States was able to stave off European influence into Caribbean affairs, but to keep the Caribbean all to itself. So it was not altruistic. It was the way for the U.S. to do what it had to do to extract resources and to extract people. And to this day, Caribbeans continue to come into the United States where they can find economic opportunity that they cannot find in their home countries because of destabilization that has been caused by the United States, especially during this war on drugs, so-called. Next slide. An inside look at Haiti. Here we have Jimmy Cherizier, also known as Barbecue. He is a so-called gang leader. That's my last time saying that misnomer. I will not call them that. We will call them militia forces, revolutionaries, people who are working among themselves to fill a power vacuum that was caused by the United States in the very first place. So amid all of this, 200 of these groups continue to fight for power and influence, and they say they want to do so without U.S. interference. And earlier this year, the Biden administration announced a collaboration with the Kenyan government, through which President Ruto, who just visited the White House not too long ago, President Ruto was able to dispatch these forces on behalf of the United States to Haiti. Well, it looks like the forces aren't doing too well because the Haitians, they know their own communities, they know their own landscape, they know the cuts, and they're able to cut and for what looks like, you know, even a glimmer of a second, they're collaborating around their opposition to U.S.-Kenyan interference. And the U.S. and Kenya are in the midst of this one-year contract. Whether it will get extended, I'm not entirely sure. I'm hoping that one of my comrades can talk about that later on. Next slide, please. The Congo. So as I'm talking about the Congo, I'm also going to talk about Paul Kagame of Rwanda. He was a militia fighter back during the 1990s or so, at the height of a genocide that the United States decided not to jump into. You know, they just wanted to give humanitarian aid. And Rwanda is one of the U.S.'s quote unquote success stories as it relates to a country bouncing back and excelling. You know, from my understanding, there's an all-women cabinet. It's one of the cleanest countries, you know, on the African continent, and governance, you know, as far as domestically, is something to be envied. And Paul Kagame has been looked at as an astute leader for the most part. The other side of that coin has been his interference in the affairs of the Congo, with the Rwandan forces collaborating with M23. These groups have been infiltrating the Congo at least since 2021, trying to take control over mining operations and the country at large. And according to sources familiar with the situation, Paul Kagame is not doing it out of the altruism of his heart. He's doing it rather to extract control and to extract resources. But he's able to do so with the U.S. watching him and doing nothing, partially because they don't want to legitimize that Rwandan success story. And some people even speculate there's guilt from not interfering in the 1994 genocide that caused the mass exodus of Rwandan people and put the country on lockdown. So a lot to look to, you know, as it relates to that region. Once again, the Congo, you know, a lot of what's going on, once again, you know, we go back to Patrice Lumumba and, you know, those 6 months of his presidency attempting to do the good work. And just after he got put out, or killed rather, just to keep it very bluntly, that country got destabilized. And that continues to happen to this day with the aid of Paul Kagame, who was a U.S. ally. So the U.S. government versus the Alliance of Sahel states, we're going all over the continent, y'all. So we're looking at Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They formed the Alliance of Sahel states last year after they ousted their neo-colonial leaders during the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in 2022. Mali and Burkina Faso were not invited because of what they had done during the pandemic. And by doing this, they have set off, you know, many questions, you know, especially among the commander of Afrikan, also known as Africa Command. For those who are not aware, the U.S. government, since the Bush administration, but it has proliferated under the Obama administration, the U.S. government had what's called Afrikan. So U.S. military bases that are put on almost every country on the continent. Its home base, of course, is in Germany. It's still there. But as you'll see later on in the presentation, U.S. military officials are really pressing to get the home base of Afrikan put on the African continent. And the irony in this whole situation is that these so-called coups were initiated by people who were trained by Afrikan, because Afrikan provides training, they provide resources, and they provide intelligence that the U.S. government gives to these African nations, and is all part of an effort to soften relations. But that's the irony. And one more aspect, speaking of softening relations, I want to point your attention to Voice of America. Now, admittedly, before 2 weeks ago, I knew nothing about Voice of America's true ambitions. Mind you, I've worked 2 doors down in some places with Voice of America people, but Voice of America, for all intents and purposes, is a U.S. propaganda arm that is broadcasted all around the world. So even with this article that I posted, you got to read it with a very critical eye, and you got to read it for educational purposes, just in terms of understanding what it is that the U.S. Africa Command is trying to do on the continent. And you'll see later on in the slide exactly what I'm talking about. So as I said, AFRICOM is a proactive approach, military first, and it's about protecting U.S. interest on the continent. Excuse me. The U.S. government has been able to do so through AFRICOM through the diplomacy, development, and defense. So the AFRICOM is the defense part, and they're looking at jihad as a very big threat, you know, especially in Western Africa and Central Africa or Northern Africa, for, you know, to some extent. But AFRICOM is not there. Again, these people do not come on the continent altruistically or with helping out. You know, there's never a free lunch. Africa is on track to become the world's third largest economy by 2063. Africa currently possesses 65% of the world's arable land, 30% of its mineral resources, 12% of its 10% of the planet's renewable freshwater resources. So there's a lot on the continent, you know, that they want. 12% of the world's oil, exactly. So a lot on the continent that they're trying to protect for themselves. And you'll see it right here from the general's mouth. Next slide. Since 2007. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right, straight from the, sorry, back. Let's take it back. All right, so straight from the horse's mouth, Michael Langley. And again, black people in high positions of power, he's telling you straight from his mouth. Africa's critical minerals and maritime shipping lanes become more important to America's technological and energy independence every day. America's fastest growing partners for trade, space exploration, and scientific exchange are in Africa, and its young and fast growing populations are the key to safeguarding the global rules-based order. Dang. If we fail in Africa, our strategic competitors will move in. If we succeed, so do the peoples of Africa. And he said this as recently as March. Strategic competitors, we're talking about China and Russia primarily, but the BRICS nations, you know, with South Africa already being there, of course. And I did mention China. So we got Brazil and India, as well as Russia, what I mentioned. So let's just say India and Brazil. They're also competitors to some extent, you know, with the United States for their interests. Let's keep in mind, there was a period of time where the United States was not popular with African nations. So as they continue to engage the United States in debt, they also looked to these other countries, which raises the question of how is it that we can best as African people foster a situation where we are not looking to any outsiders, where we are fighting for our own resources, where we are fighting for collaboration and cooperation among one another, because this is just another proxy war that is happening in real time. And Michael Langley has told us that. Next slide, please. Before we wrap up, just want to bring to your attention, you know, so the other slides mentioned Benin and Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast right now is in collaboration with Liberia to some extent. They border one another. They're looking at what they consider a problem in the Sahel. So just as the Alliance of Sahel states are clicking up, we have states that are still under the auspices of ECOWAS clicking up as well. And what we have is an internal conflict where one side is advancing sovereignty and the other side is advancing neocolonialism. That other side being Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Liberia, so forth and so on. And right now, it is incumbent now more than ever at least that's what the U.S. government is saying, it is incumbent now more than ever to maintain these relationships in order to ensure that revolution does not spread throughout the continent. And there was some prediction of this in 2022 during the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit that was actually a way for the Biden administration to make up for what the Trump administration had done in terms of souring relationships. So whereas in the past, the United States would extract resources from the African continent, the raw material, and process that material and bring it back to the continent to sell to people, now the United States has entered MOUs, memorandums of understanding with African nations to create or to finance processing plants on the continent, to create 60 or some odd jobs per processing plant. But even with those deals, you still don't have control of your resources. So why is it that we're not controlling our resources and creating our own processing plants to make money off of those resources? Well, guess what? Burkina Faso just did that not too long ago. So here we have is a fight for resources, power, and sovereignty that is affecting the people in the grassroots. All the while, the United States continues its rampage, continues to influence policy, and they do so through diplomacy and defense, as well as development to some extent, which you guys just heard about. So the next slide, what it will talk about is Nigeria and Ghana. Now, there have been talks about moving the base. What does moving the Afrikan base look like? Because even with Afrikan's presence, Islamic Jihad, as they call it, is still making a rampage throughout the continent. They can't seem to get a foothold. Their trained soldiers are turning against them and using what they learned in those bases for revolution. So what is Afrikans to do? They are eyeing a move of its base to the African continent. So as I mentioned before, Afrikan, the central location is based in Germany, but they want to move it to Ghana. Ghana is being looked at as that place where, just given its relationship, its relative stabilization, and the fact that they speak English in Ghana. So it's looked at as an ideal location. And also, as the slide said earlier, Ghana just signed an MOU not too long ago with the U.S. government or with Afrikan rather, for use of its roads. So that's a relationship that to an extent has already been solidified that could pave the way for Afrikan making it on the African continent, the main Afrikan base at least. As far as Nigeria, for the longest time, Nigeria has been in opposition of Afrikan, but as they continue to keep getting dogged by insurgents, they're looking to Afrikan as a solution more and more. So here we have, once again, a case of Africans, at least in the leadership sector, not really being hard-pressed to do for themselves. And we have another proxy war on the horizon, if it hasn't already started yet, between the U.S., Russia, and China, in which the Alliance of Sahel states and others are being caught up in. So definitely a lot to look to as we, keep our eyes on this election. I don't see it getting better under any president. We just see American interests being advanced regardless. But I think that we have enough at our disposal in order to talk about how it is we best unite as a people and practice Garveyism in this time. With that, I leave y'all. That is my presentation. Sort of surface level, I understand. But alas, I think the main theme here is that we are in for a rude awakening, with Africa being a resource-rich place. And one more point I want to bring up. We got to find a way to stop the brain drain on the African continent. A lot of us are doing that through repatriation. Even with that, those of us who repatriate have to do so not as people taking a vacation, but as people really looking to immerse themselves in the culture and make a difference on the continent. So we have that being solved pretty much through repatriation efforts on the continent, of course. But in order to stop the brain drain, we need stronger institutions, and we need a grassroots push for those institutions. We're seeing that in Kenya. We're seeing that in Zimbabwe. We're seeing it in Liberia to some extent. Ethiopia is being rampaged by gentrification. Forgive me, I keep going on and on. But, you know, there's quite a lot, you know, to talk about in regards of how we build institutions, because our best and our brightest are being picked off by the U.S. government as the U.S. government co-ops through the White House as they co-opt Pan-Africanism. So we have well-meaning young people who are being brought on by the State Department and the White House to promote Pan-Africanism, but in the interest of the U.S. government. So that is exactly where our taxpayer dollars are going, and it is something that we should be very, very concerned about. I yield.
Greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
All right. Can I be seen?
No.
All right. See, I don't know what's going on, but man, I'll just use my voice. That was a great presentation, brother. That was an absolutely great presentation. Again, appreciate the amount of research and the amount of information and how you bring it all together and present it. From, like you said, a universal African nationalist perspective. You do it masterfully. You know, your title says grassroots journalist, educator, and author, but you're a little more than that, brother. You know, you're a lot more than that. Those titles are just titles.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Appreciate the work that you put into that presentation. We want to bring out our panelists again and initiate this conversation. So I might not be on the screen, but I'm here.
Ambassador Sam P.K. Collins, Ambassador of Youth Development.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, man.
QPG.
Yes, sir. Well, see, Sam brought up a few things that I want to talk about. And one was the Congo, but two, I wanted to touch on Eisenhower, who was the president when you were saying which one. It was Eisenhower. Eisenhower absolutely plotted to kill Patrice Lumumba twice. First time he tried to do it by poisoning his toothpaste. It's just that Patrice Lumumba did not brush his teeth on a regular basis. That's why I didn't get him. Then he conspired with folks on the continent through his undercover agent from the CIA to foster the murder of Patrice Lumumba to the point that they absolutely destroyed his body by putting in acid, because the U.S. government did not want any traces leading back to them, and it all landed on the continent. But they absolutely stole the potential leader that could have unified Africa by killing off Patrice Lumumba. So I wanted to absolutely touch on that. And when you also talked about the brain drain, but before I go to the brain drain, you talk about resources coming out of Africa. It was an intention to do that. See, that didn't just happen by happenstance. The U.S. government was very, very keen, and the plot was to say, oh, the point of stopping communism was to make Africa the front. But we also got to recognize that Russia was still on the continent of Africa, and now China is on the continent of Africa as well. Chief, your picture is back. So I wanted to touch on those things, because I think it's crucial to looking at foreign policy as it also impacts the local policies on this continent. See, so it's not one or the other. The brain drain is because America needs that thrust, and therefore they can also speak to the fact that, see, we all right with you, black people, okay? And the same thing here, pulling them into government structure, but that will potentially change with the next administration based on what they said about Project 2025. But what I wanted to do is they also, in Project 2025, deal with Africa in different quadrants: Middle East and North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, each with the same thrust. The same thrust, just different tools to accomplish the same thing. So I wanted to start that conversation because when you mentioned, so
So anyway, let me just chime in real quick here, right? First of all, Sam, great presentation, brother. You said that you couldn't cover a lot. Man, if we gave you 2 hours, boy, I imagine it's gonna be a whole lot. But what you covered in less than 20 minutes was excellent, brother. I really appreciate you, and obviously the listeners hopefully will listen to this more than one time and to learn something, because you put together such a great presentation where people can better understand why Africa is in the condition that it's in today. I want to, also throw another thing in the mix. We need to watch South Africa. I like to say Azania. We need to watch that carefully, because due to a slip up in black leadership through the ANC, Urugu has slipped his way back into governmental relations. And there is a word out that what they might do, if they get kicked back and moved on, they might excommunicate themselves from that and establish a own nation state within a nation and do the same foolishness that happened with Palestine. So we need to watch that. Urugu ain't got no business in no leadership positions, nor do they have a right to fund our leaders, because they become misleaders. But you actually got Urugu sitting in power in South Africa after South Africa attacked Is It Real for its inhumane attacks and taking Palestine, which they ain't got no business there anyway. So we need to really watch that very carefully, because Urugu is so paranoid right now of our uprising. They're actually trying to move back in South Africa and watch what they do, because remember when they slid into Palestine after coming through Uganda, Africa, and not settling, went to Israel, which is really part of Africa. That's a whole nother conversation. But the point I'm making is that you see what is happening in Palestine right now, in the Gaza, et cetera, where Is It Real is taking control, and they had no natural right of even being there in the first place. So we need to be very aware of that. And we need to also know that Is It Real could not be where it's at without support of the U.S. government. I'll stop on that point.
To your point, and just as a continuation, when Is It Real, as you said, Is It Real reached out to establish their own independent nation in Palestine, the first and staunch supporter was America on day one. So, but I want to also connect this back to us here on this land and how it impacts us, because foreign policy is not just how they treat people of African descent abroad. It is also how they treat African people at home, for a lack of a better term. You could say this is someplace we renting, but how we dealt with it. Maybe we paying rent, but or pay rent with our labor for this time. So that America has always been about its own individualistic self. It's always been about white power. See, so since that is the essence of this nation, we also recognize even throughout the various elections, because you could tie some of this conversation to the last presentation that Sam gave, how elections and presidents put one voice out, but in actuality did something different. I mean, we laud Barack Obama for being the first quote unquote black male president, but he did not have a black agenda.
Symbol without substance. Right. Symbol without substance.
Right. But he didn't have an agenda, because to have had a black agenda, he'd probably not get elected. Because we have a tendency to believe in we are president of the people, and that people meaning everybody. But every other white president that this country has ever had saw white interests first, and therefore built a platform on white interests first, including what was that first one? The general. Anyway,
yeah.
His name escapes me at the moment. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick, man. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Some of the points that I seen that was vital for us to, piggyback on and have more dialogue on that came out of Brother Sam's presentation. One thing that popped in my mind immediately was, we've been doing this for the last 3 months, particularly within the context of trying to inform U.S. voters ahead of the elections from different perspectives, so at least they have an informed mind. They understand the national policies, the international policies. They understand what Project 2025 is, and all these other things, right? And so I think that this last presentation really like knocked home the point of how responsible we have to be with the ballot. Yeah. We're not voting for anything local or national. We're voting for on behalf of those who can't vote, that will be directly impacted by whoever we put in power, whoever we decide. Right. You know, and so the brother was explaining how, you know, these policies, they destabilize these African countries. They destabilize these Caribbean countries to the point that people run away from their homes in order to try to get resources in the same countries that's robbing them, in the same countries that's taking them. This is why we can say, you know, most of the minerals that we need come from the Congo, come from this country or that country, because that's the essence of imperialism. That's what colonialism is. That's what it produces. It produces a outflow, a theft of people's resources, and a denial of their sovereignty. Oversteps your borders, forget about your interests, forget about your government. A lot of it is criminal, even as they do it, even against the laws of the countries in Africa. They're extracting a lot of resources and wealth from Africa. So a lot of it is like law-breaking theft.
It is law-breaking thief.
Absolutely. When you're living here, you know that even that the people here have laws and rules and regulations in place to kind of, you know, nip it in the butt on the ground. But even then, they go around those systems. That's what corruption is. The bribery. What I can give an official to take this diamond and keep moving. And so, you know, the bribery is deep, and it's even between countries as well. So when you talk about American policy, it's almost like they try to bribe African countries into going against the interests of their own nations. And so this is where you get all of this what we call corruption and theft at the high levels of power on the continent. The brother mentioned the situation in the Congo. He talked about Haiti, Liberia, Rwanda, and we could have talked about every single place that African people exist. You'll find the same universal policies in place. Even at the local neighborhood level, it mirrors the international level. And so I thought that was very, very key as well. Also, there's been the media currently stirring up the anti-immigration pot in the United States of America, particularly as in the context of this current election. It's always there, but around election time, it really becomes a big discussion everywhere. It's not just us discussing it. Everybody's discussing the immigrant crisis, right? And so if we can touch on that a little bit, I would like to do that. But before that, I want to say also, this guy, Michael Langley, the Afrikan Commander General, Michael Langley, he is the highest ranking United States military official of African descent ever. I mean, when you talk about having black faces in powerful places, this man is like the ultimate invader on behalf of white supremacy right now. This Afrikan thing, we've been analyzing it as a movement since 2006, 2007, analyzing it. And I think that what's happening in the Sahel and the confrontation between Afrikan and the Sahel forces is something that we're going to see a lot more of moving forward, because the Sahel is not going anywhere. It's going to continue to grow and expand. And we have an obligation to make sure that happens. So I wanted to seize there, but also open up that discussion as well about the media stirring up the anti-immigration pot. Let's talk about that also.
Yes, sir. It's not just the media that's doing it. The media is how we hear it. but the anti-immigration is because of resources. Now, America needs people, but they want specific people. That's why when Sam Collins mentioned the brain drain, those are folks they want here. But let's talk about why people are coming to America from different countries. Not all of them are coming in a nice way. America has destabilized countries around the world. They destabilized Mexico. They destabilized Venezuela. They destabilized the Latin countries, of which people now are coming here across countries in order to attempt to get what they consider a better life than where they are. Because what America did is similar to its own incursion on Cuba, when they did it first with its gangsters and the negativity and the destruction of the Cuban culture. They've done it in other places. They've done it in Venezuela, and therefore that established a different kind of regime, because it did not establish a political regime, but it established the bully pulpit, which made drug sales critical, but did not make caring for your people at all, because you had numbers you didn't care. So America, in dealing with immigrants, it created the situation for folks to try to get away from a death dealing situation to come to a place where they figured would be better. And initially, also with immigrants, they allowed them to come across the borders without anything to reserve them, because they were the ones that did pick the fruit. They're the ones that worked in the fields. They were the ones that worked 16 hours a day for virtually no money, just to have what they considered a better life. So now you raise that issue because it's like, oh, it's too many. You created the situation that forced them here, and now you have a problem. So you say, I want to send them back. It's therefore becomes a conversation that's ongoing in order to try to address the tribulations that America has adjusted. It's trying to address it, but it's saying, hey, I can't do this because y'all coming, so I'm gonna send y'all back and send you back there. America is not trying to fix the problem. What they're attempting to do is fix their own problem.
So I got a lot to say, but I want to hear from Shaka Ra and Abib too, because I know we got a lot to say. PG, we've been around a little while. So if we could hear from the UK. No, serious business though. I mean, I know, y'all know Garveyites are long-winded, but brother Shaka Ra and Abib, we want to hear from y'all too, man.
Yeah, peace to the panel, man. Peace to brother Sam PK Collins on your presentation. I think, I wanted to sit back and listen a little bit just to kind of get some more information on what direction was going in with the discussion. But I think it's important in terms of when we talk about, immigrants coming into the country, and it's important when talking about Jamaica, because both of those two things directly impact me. We're talking about my entire life. It's earlier in the presentation when you were talking about Jamaica and where you were talking about how they've been a U.S. ally, I think it's important to note that it wasn't just tensions in Jamaica, right? It was an actual civil war, it was an actual proxy war that was fought on the ground in Jamaica. And the reason why that's important is because it wasn't just U.S. policy, it was also Cuban policy, Cuban foreign policy and Russian foreign policy. There's a program a lot of people that's not aware of called the Brigadista program, where a lot of Jamaicans were being trained in Cuba and being trained in guerrilla warfare, espionage, and that kind of a thing. And then, of course, you had the CIA doing the same thing. And so what ended up happening is you have black people killing black people, right? And so you have people on the streets who are now fighting each other on behalf of this particular world power or another particular world power. And so chaos ensues, and you have a lot of people that are now coming into the U.S. and coming into the U.K. and different countries. So I think it's important to phrase it that way, and important to put that on it, because a lot of times we think of Jamaica as just one homogenous thing, as if everyone kind of moves lock and step, and it's not like that. Even when you start talking about the Rasta community and their political alignment, they were politically aligned to Haile Selassie and to the Ethiopian monarchy, because they looked at it as being African based rather than allying with Russia or allying with the United States. These are soldiers. These are, when people look at Rastas, they think these are just some crazy men in a mountain smoking ganja. These are mercenaries and soldiers who are disillusioned with the war that was going on in Jamaica and decided to take another route. And so you have a lot of them coming into the UK, you have a lot of them coming into the United States, and they're talking about repatriation and going back to Africa. And then and even in talking about that, when you talk about Haile Selassie and Ethiopia's role, Ethiopia, of course, was given training to the ANC and to Nelson Mandela. They were given weapons and they were given resources to different groups on the continent.
Yes,
you had Cuba was sending soldiers to Angola and to fight apartheid. Jamaica, before they got their independence, was one of the first countries, if not the first country, to sanction South Africa and the apartheid state. So it's a lot more complicated than I think people realize. And I think Jamaica sometimes gets a bad rap because of them being a U.S. ally, but there are factions on the ground. Those Garveyites that we talk about, those families still exist on the ground. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people, for instance, my cousin on my father's side, Dudley Thompson, he was a Pan-Africanist and he was a lawyer for Jomo Kenyatta. You get what I mean? So Jamaicans, there's a lot of different factions. There's a lot of people on the ground. There's a lot of blood that was spilled too. Blood that was spilled in America, in Brooklyn, in Miami. That was, an extension of the proxy war that was fought in Jamaica. So I just wanted to just induce that into the conversation to let people know that, people weren't just standing idly by, just allowing stuff to happen. There was a lot of different factions at play and a lot of different decisions to be made. So, yeah.
Good point. Excellent point.
Let me step in here and just also big up Brother Sam PK for the presentation. It was powerful and informative, and I don't envy the task, as you said at the beginning. The shaggery that US is going on with all over the world is impossible to get through all of it. You know what I'm saying? So give thanks for the attempt. Just to add a couple things. In fact, before I do that, let me just take a moment to let people know Brother Sam did touch on Haiti, and we're going to be speaking to Brother Jafrique Haiti on Tuesday, the 29th. Yeah, so do stay tuned for that. We'll let you know the details at the end of the show, but we're going to get deeper into what's happening in Haiti in depth. Yeah. And I'm saying that because Brother Sam PK did ask, you know what I'm saying, for those who have more information to share it, and we're going to be delving into it on that day. I do want to say that to add in relation to Afrikan, the similar institution that is operating on and over the jurisdiction of the Caribbean is called Southcom. Yeah, for brothers and sisters to be aware of the fact that Southcom is the equivalent of Afrikan, designed to govern militarily the Caribbean region. Yeah, that's very, very important to know, especially because of the fact that I was speaking to a noted activist called Brother Loezi the other day. He's based in the UK from Congo, but he's a part of the Uhuru movement under the leadership of Omali Eshetela, who brothers and sisters should be aware of if you're not. Stay tuned, yeah. But we were just having a conversation, and he was saying to me that that the US is effectively done with Kagame and Museveni at the moment. Yeah, so we've already seen some propaganda ramping up against Museveni in recent years, after decades of him being a known US puppet. And he said that you're going to start seeing similar with Kagame soon. And he said that that's going to happen because they believe that they can replace the two of them with William Ruto in Kenya. Yeah. So that William Ruto in Kenya has positioned himself to be the U.S.A.'s number one, puppet on the African continent. It's also important to know, and I'm just putting that out there because that's what a wise elder said to me, and so I think it's wise to put it in the minds of the people. Jamaica, after decades of being, one of the worst nations in the Caribbean as far as economically concerned, because they were always in debt to the IMF and had some of the worst deals with the IMF and so on and so forth. Recently, they've become an IMF darling. Yeah, the current prime minister was admitted into the Privy Council of the United Kingdom recently as well, and so it seems that the USA is trying to change its relationship with Jamaica to a degree whereby the Jamaican government will play the similar role of the Kenyan government in the Caribbean region. Yeah, so we have to bear all these dynamics in mind. Yeah, because one of the things that we'll notice is the fact that Caribbean governments have been very quiet on the issue of Haiti. Yes, and whenever you do hear them, they are speaking in a manner that legitimizes the voice of America and the United Nations in the activities of Haiti, as though we are not aware of the history of the USA in Haiti. And so the only voice that you're going to hear from on a governmental level, generally speaking, from the Caribbean region and the Caribbean community, CARICOM, are those that allow for whatever the US agenda is to take place. Yeah. And I'm going to say one more thing for now before we come back to other different things. What's it called? But one of the things that I became aware of, I'm going to share my screen on this one, is this this initiative that began under Trump, called Prosper Africa. All right. So I want to fling this into the mix to be aware of. And Prosper Africa is, as it says here, U.S. Trade and Investment Initiative, increasing trade and investment between the U.S. and African countries. Prosper Africa brings together services from across the U.S. government to help companies and investors do business in the U.S.A. and African markets. Yeah. So when you see this term here, African markets, all right, please be aware of the fact that the target here is to take advantage of the population of Africa and have U.S. corporations provide given access to the populations of Africa in order to sell their wares and their resources. That is what is taking place there. Yeah. Let's go a little bit further. Browse our full suite of services to unlock potential opportunities. And so it says, I'm a business, U.S. business investor. That's the first thing, yeah. So I'm a business, I'm a U.S. business or investor. So we can see in terms of priority that Prosper Africa is aimed at U.S. businesses and investors, quote unquote, yeah, looking for an investment or expansion opportunities, yeah. So we got to look a bit further down, and then we see again exporting to African markets, invest in Africa, and then we see browse all opportunities. And when we click the browse all opportunities button, it takes us to another page, yeah. We have to look at how they organize their propaganda as well, brothers and sisters, yeah. And it says services. We bring together a robust package of U.S. government services and resources. Browse our full kit below. So we're going to browse the full kit below. It opens up in a new window. So I'm going to copy and paste that window into what I'm sharing right about now. And we're going to get to some different language now. So it says about Prosper Africa. Prosper Africa is a presidential level national security initiative. Yeah. So before now, all we were talking about was business and investment, right? And all them thing there. We got to look a bit further, and it's a presidential level. Now remember, the president of the United States of America is also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, primarily responsible for national security. Yeah. So why is Prosper Africa a presidential level national security initiative, quote unquote, aimed at strengthening the strategic and economic partnership between the U.S. and Africa by catalyzing transformative two-way trade, investments, and flows. Yeah. So this is that a lot of pretty language there, and if you're not paying attention, you won't understand what is being said. But there's a couple of things that I just want to highlight from that. When you read other literature about Prosper Africa, you're going to hear a lot of things about what's the word? Increasing the private sector. Yes. And in international geopolitical speech, what that means is weakening the power of the government in terms of the protection of the economy and the nations, and increasing the power of private institutions to come and take advantage of the markets of the African continent. Because of the fact that capital is heavily concentrated in the West and America in particular, the private sector or expansion of the private sector normally means an increase in the presence of Western in general and American in particular corporations in your nation and in your market, taking advantage of your markets, your resources, your labor, yes, and so on and so forth. That's what that generally speaking means. And because of the fact, and by the way, Prosper Africa was an initiative started by Trump that was expanded under the Biden administration. Yeah. So we're seeing that this is a bipartisan vibration right here. Yeah? So then the where was that? Right. So we on foreign policy now. What another thing that is a bipartisan vibration is the current trade war with China. Trump increased tariffs and went to war with certain Chinese companies, and Biden only expanded that program. Biden put out a tweet a couple months ago that they've put 100% tariff on electronic vehicles coming out of China. That means for Chinese electronic vehicles, and China is widely considered at the moment to be the most advanced as far as electronic vehicles are concerned. For those vehicles to be sold in the United States of America, you literally have to pay twice what the car is worth. Yeah, what the car is being sold for. That's what that means. Yeah. So Biden 100% tariff, all right, on Chinese electronic vehicles. Yeah. So because of that, the ramping up of that trade war, America's continued trade relationship with China, they're preparing for some friction there, and I'm positing the idea that what they're going to try and do is replace some of the labor exploitation that they've been able to do as far as China is concerned with Africa. But Africa is going to be much easier because of the fact that the Chinese government was creating deals to expand its own incursion into the global market. African and Caribbean nations are not economically developing ourselves in the same way, and we need to be. Yeah. But it seems to me to be the case that a lot of what, first of all, they're trying to make sure that China doesn't supersede them in Africa, but they also want to replace some of what they are doing in China with an African labor force should the case arise, so the need arise for them to do so. I'm going to leave it there for now.
Ashe. Black Power.
Yeah, awesome contribution, Brother Shakarai. Awesome contribution. So I wanna ask a question and then we can chime in on it. One is, we're looking at this in the context again of this next election, and originally our first symposium was around Project 2025 and beyond, and in preparation for this particular event, we had some discussions and we came up with some questions, some table topics. So I want to move into them. One of them, and this is just for conversation's sake, sometimes the people just need to witness us talk. They need to witness us have some conversation among ourselves so they can reason themselves. And so we was talking about viewing this current international quagmire, the current situation as we just spoke about, within the context of the 2025 project and what happens if Trump wins. Basically, there's a lot of things about what kind of policies they're going to immediately come in with. I'm not sure what the international policy is, particularly towards Africa. I know we just touched on it. Maybe we could touch on it a little more. But what happens? What happens if we turn our head and we look back and Mr. Orange is in power again?
It's once the new administration.
What do we have to prepare for? What is it that we have to prepare for in terms of?
No, I'm sorry, Chief. Go ahead.
No. What do we have to prepare for in terms of international policies and immigration? Really, because that's what the conversation is about. How international policies and trade is really behind this. Behind it all.
One of the things it says is the new administration can correct, and I'm actually reading from Project 2025, can correct the strategic failings of existing policies by prioritizing Africa and by undertaking fundamental change in how the United States works with African nations. So if you take the piece that Shakara just laid out and on how they're moving, and then you take from Sam P.K. Collins the brain drain thrust, it tells you what their intention is to prioritize being able to control the economical as well as the political situations in Africa to prevent us from having one Africa. because one Africa
Absolutely.
does not fit their plan. It only fits as long as we stay separated and stay divisive. That's how it fits. So that's what we have to look forward to as it comes to Africa, how we get to look forward to when it comes to immigration. When you are a value to their economic structure and political will, you'll be okay to come. If not, you ain't coming. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And see, America with Project 2025 puts race equally as a priority as it does to economics. So that's what we get a chance to look forward to. It's going to spend it down, and they are focusing on Africa. Another piece that says that Africa is important to the U.S. is going to continuously grow, and it's going to grow because of what Africa can provide to the world. So they are planning, for all intents and purposes, to move on trying to take control of African nations, keep them separated, keep us disunified, and keep us pulling on strings. And that's being polite. So Sam P.K. Collins, I also did not say that you did a great presentation because I wanted to wait for the conversation to go. But not only is the presentation great, it continues to spur the type of conversation that came from the tabletop questions. So what we have to get our people to do is to begin to think and then realize that organize on every level.
And be super prepared for whatever, because no matter whether Trump or Harris gets selected, 2025 is still on the table. I want y'all to be very clear on what I'm saying. So people are always like Chief, I didn't catch all of what PG was saying, but you said something was very important. What do we need to do? A lot of people are preparing to see stuff in the streets if Trump wins, but you also need to be prepared if Harris wins to see stuff in the streets too. If y'all hear what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is it's not either this or that. We need to be prepared and to be self-reliant and to hunker in to educate our young brothers and sisters on how to react when things get really out of whack, because they could easily get out of whack here in North America. I'm not just talking about United States, North America and the world, because everybody's already on edge. Everybody's already caught in emotion, and that ain't going to help us. The emotion ain't going to help us. Being afraid ain't going to help us. Being prepared for whatever.
Yeah.
And I know that's a loaded one, but because preparedness means a lot of things. But since we are using this way of communication, I'm just going to be straightforward. Be prepared for whatever. And that means be strong and make sure that you know how to survive under circumstances. See, we in North America, even though we have Africans in North America have more resources and accessibility, we spoiled. We are spoiled, and we are used to living a certain way that could change in a moment. And then if it goes to that way, we be looking at what's going on around the world. But be aware, when your Rugu is afraid and fearful, anything could jump off. And so African people need to be prepared, need to organize, and also unify globally, because here in the North America, we are considered a so-called minority in number. Okay, but in the Western Hemisphere, we are the majority. In the Eastern Hemisphere, we are the majority. In the world, we are the majority. So we need to really unify and be aware that all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Yeah, dig it. Could dig that. So just another counter question, just to take it in a whole nother direction.
Okay.
Is the United States of America ready for a woman president? Seriously, because we've been having this conversation, and somebody's going to be elected. Someone's going to be selected. Somebody's going to be sworn in. We're going to have to deal with their ass for the next 4 years, and we need to be prepared and organized, like you said. So, like, are we ready? Do you think that America as a society is ready for a woman president.
So let me chime in since I finished up. Let me chime in real quickly here. Chief, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And Obama was substance, was symbol without substance for us. Harris gonna be the same. But because she is a woman, as you said, and America on the Urugu side is a very, very crazy place, the blame game. I suspect we're not ready. We're not ready as so-called America. Black people think they're ready for a black woman president, but we're not. Because first of all, she's an employee. She works for Urugu white, I ain't gonna say supremacy, but a white government. And she pops at the whip of what they say. And a lot of times our people are asleep on that. They think the president got super control. But this Trump thing should teach people a lesson. Because here you got a cat that's been a womanizer with over 30 women, called Africa an asshole country, been charged as a criminal, and he's still cool to run for president. And not even the Washington Post or no newspaper is endorsing any candidate now because they afraid. They afraid if Trump wins, Trump gonna come after them. You hear what I'm saying? Now, if Harris wins as what you saying, you're gonna have all of those racist white folks and some black male, not kinfolk, but skin folk, blame everything on the woman being president. Trust me. And so that's a good point you raised, bro. And I know some other people can chime in, but I know for a fact the country wasn't ready for Obama. Black people thought they were ready for Obama and everything gonna be. Hey, you saw what happened in Africa. You saw what happened to Gaddafi. You saw what happened. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? So the same kind of thing gonna jump off with a female blackface president. Trust me. The blame game. The blame game is gonna happen. So I know y'all got some other things that y'all want to share, but I'm not too happy about anything going on in America today.
Say that. Brother Sam, Brother Sam?
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I think that the question is the wrong question to ask, in the sense that America is always going to be ready for a woman leader who follows the precepts of American empire. You know, so even Kamala, she's in her role as president. If she is to become president, she's still going to, like Baba Senghor say, carry water for the U.S. empire. So that goes on without question. And you know, this whole thing about women, you know, and I'm going to preface this by saying that I love black women. I came from a black mother. I got a black wife. I work with black women in the media industry, so nothing I'm about to say is in any way against black women, but they are weaponizing black girl magic to separate black men and black women. Black men turned out for the Democratic Party just as much as black women did in 2020 and in 2016. White women were the voters that brought Trump into office, yet President Obama fixed his mouth to talk about black men once again, and to create this perception that we are not supportive of black women, and to create this notion that if Kamala Harris doesn't win, it's because black men didn't support her, without disregarding the fact that her prosecutorial record to some degree is questionable, and she wants to create a two-state solution and help Israel defend itself by whichever means possible. They're going to disregard that. So black women, it can be argued, and I'm willing to stand on this, black women, black professional women, black women who want to navigate U.S. society, who want to get titles, and, you know, because who doesn't want titles? Who doesn't want to be educated? I don't, you know, I empathize with that. But to some degree, black women are being weaponized to carry the water for the U.S. empire and to divide the black family to some extent. Now, that's not to disregard what black male rappers and black men in general are saying about Kamala Harris and are saying about black women in general. I am not disregarding that at all. But what I am saying is that the United States has a way of picking different ethnic groups, different constituencies, and making them feel seen, all in the interest of advancing a neo-colonial imperialist ideology.
Absolutely.
Hey,
Absolutely,
man.
Sam.
To the tabletop question, and isn't a disagreement to the weaponizing of the role, but the question is America ready? And again, since as they are, America is ready, but is America conscious enough to recognize that the other side, which is the other side, is really looking to create a different kind of empire, and one that is completely controlled by white nationalist creed, which is where the blood in the street can come from, which is why, regardless of how it turns out, the blood in the street can come. Now, also to the points that are raised, yes, in weaponizing that and trying to demonstrate that it can cause challenges between black males and black females, but I do believe more in our ability, our conscious ability to move that needle in our favor, to maintain the type of structure that is good between black men and black women. And I think because we have to also do that because of the black children that we're raising, I'm looking more at the generation to come as opposed to just the generation now. I think we have an opportunity now to channel that information into our youth and channel that information into our society, that it isn't male female as a dominant, but male female as a partnership.
Right on, right on. Anybody else want to add to that? Shaka, Brother Abib?
I got one more thing to add in regards to that. The young people are the ones being targeted the most, and if we are not careful, and if we don't continue to sustain our institutions and build new ones, they will be miseducated about the true nature of the U.S. political system. Because straight out the womb, they are being told that there are only Democrats and Republicans. They are being told that Donald Trump is the antithesis of the democracy. They're being fed the talking points that are often fed to third-party voters. You know, a vote against Kamala is a vote for Trump. You know, BS like that. And these are people who we talk to. They didn't just get this out of anywhere. They were inculcated into this culture from the very beginning inside Babylonian school systems. So in order for us to counter that, we got to create institutions of our own. You know, we got to sustain our African-centered schools. Our African-centered schools got to be more diligent about, you know, fostering political ideologies. You know, it is about culture, because culture is the foundation. You know, but that political philosophy has to be intact. We got to be very sure about who we are and who we not politically. So after we learn the Habari Ghanis and we dress, what are we teaching our children politically? What opportunities are we giving them to actually understand the U.S. government for what it is? Because, you know, quiet is kept. We got a lot of Democrats and dashikis out here.
Absolutely. You got Republicans and dashikis too.
I'm telling you. So, you know, and that's why nationalism right now, I don't like taking the Black Panther, you know, derogatory terms. I'm not going to say it, but, you know, we're in danger of not being taken seriously if we don't, in this generation, build institutions that'll perpetuate, you know, and that's why, you know, I got to shout out Mali on the continent. Like, I think, like, you know, man, you know, like institution building, that Kimbunga institutions. What are we doing as far as building institute for far too long? There have been brothers and sisters who have, like, within the nationalist community, who have taken on Urugu thinking in terms of like turning on YouTube and just talking for hours on end without any programs, without any organizations, without any institution. That's got to stop. That's got to stop.
That's another tabletop discussion.
Oh yeah,
because it is, because that's a whole nother venue of where we are mentally and where we are going mentally. Absolutely, another tabletop question.
It essentially means that we have people out there cosplaying and defrauding the people look at by dressing up like us and using our terminologies, and it's a real thing. It's a real thing. You know,
because
go ahead.
No, I'm going to say because the building of institutions, I think, is essential, and that's where the black education system came from. Building institutions is where it started. I agree that we have to bring it back. That's why, in support of not just support of Mali, but in support of building those kind of institutions here too. And wherever we are, we need to build schools and begin to teach a curriculum that moves our people in the direction of what is in our best interest. Again, we build one Africa, we can leave America alone.
Say that.
You know something though?
Say that.
What that's bringing to my mind though, yeah, and this kind of relates to the broader topic in terms of foreign policy, is the recent situation with Afrikan Stream, yeah,
yes,
and the shutdown of Afrikan Stream, because that is an act of foreign policy interest, yeah, at work, and it, as well as Africom and Southcom, and there's a few other coms. There's also a Cybercom, yeah, which is the U.S. military high command in relation to the internet. All right, you know what I'm saying, so that the U.S. interest can be protected on the internet, and all of these platforms that we're using, including us right about now, yeah, are all to in the final analysis regulated by the U.S. government and its intelligence agencies. So when we see Sam was just talking about institution building and the importance of us being engaged in institution building. One of the primary institutions that we need at the moment is good media and propaganda. Yeah, Papa Garvey taught us about these things. Yeah, and Afrikan Stream was doing that work. Yeah, Afrikan Stream was doing that work. So when we talk about the Alliance of the Sahel States providing a Pan-African analysis, a high quality, newsworthy Pan-African analysis on those dynamics. And one of the things that interests me about the US election is the extent to which foreign policy is not discussed. Yeah. You hear very little foreign policy in the interviews and the debates. And when it comes up, it goes as far as Israel and Palestine and Russia and Ukraine. That's about it. But look at all of the different dynamics that Brother Sam was able to draw to our attention. And so, and even, because I follow media, so even a lot of the black media, and I should say in this instance, particularly the pro-Harris black media, is very, very deficient when it comes to foreign policy, yeah, and looking at what the US is going to be doing around the world. So, like, obviously, this is why we're here, and big up to the brotherhood, for bringing this to Kimbunga Media. But I'm just highlighting it to say that it's entirely important that we have our own media in these times to combat in whatever small way that we can a lot of the propaganda is going to be coming out against the alliance of the Sahel states, going to be coming out against those who are fighting back in South Africa and Zimbabwe and Namibia and in Haiti. Yeah, it's very, very important that we're able to inform our people. You know what I'm saying?
I totally agree, because we don't talk as much about Haiti as I think we need to, and I don't think we do it to the point that we explain the conditions that exist there was not generated by the Haitians themselves. It was the fact that there was the first black nation to be liberated and then succumb to a debt. And earlier we mentioned Liberia and its debt. We also should recognize that Marcus Garvey also helped Liberia pay its debt before Liberia turned against us because of an economical move with the U.S. government and Firestone. And yeah, me too, Sam. I don't do Firestone either. So just for the record. But yeah, we do need to speak through a media voice on a consistent basis, on a conscious level, as to what is going on, how it impacts us, and how we need to move the needle, because that can also change some of the political landscape, particularly as we begin to move African countries to a point to where they recognize they shouldn't be separated, but should be African states on an African continent unified.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we need to be unified in a global agenda, particularly as Garveyites and those who are pushing universal African nationalism. I feel like it's the remedy of the times. I feel like all the different groups and the different formations of pro-Black African nationalism really needs to return to home base when it comes to making our analysis and the style of work that we do. Now is right, actually, for us to advance the cause to a victorious conclusion. When you think about it, because of all the contradictions and different dynamics that coexist right now, it's right. It's right for struggle. You know, talking about the AES and particularly like monitoring these different struggles, because we're talking about what the problem is, but you know, our whole goal was to get to some solutions, and we can only say so much, like Brother Shakara was saying, on enemy-controlled, you know, communication platforms. But we're here to give our people something to think about and help to provoke thought and expand the conversation. Expand the conversation. You know, build the dialogue. So I want to speak about some of the things that we discussed prior that could actually help us get to a solution. And one of it is we really need to get into developing our own monitoring groups. In the same sense that they have Afrikan all around, you know, these different command centers all around the imperialist world coming out of the U.S., we also need to counter them with monitoring groups. We need to monitor what they're doing and how they're doing it, who's involved, not only the presidents and the politicians, there's other players. Like the brother was saying earlier, you got commander of Afrikan, you know, a black man, Michael Langley, most powerful black man ever in the U.S. military uniform.
Sorry, Chief. It's worth also noting that the Secretary of Defense is also black, Lloyd Austin. Yeah, Lloyd Austin.
Exactly. You know what? And this is confusing the masses of our people. Believe it or not.
Yes.
When we see these black people in these high places with this kind of respect, you know, we see the Yoruba respecting these kind of black folk, we get confused, man. In fact, in a lot of our social and cultural settings currently, if the white man is not supporting you or doesn't acknowledge you, you ain't nothing. That's almost the standard, is that the white man paying you some attention and giving you some crumbs. And so even in our movement has been distracted and taken off course, and it's being enemy controlled directly or indirectly. This is the reason for building these independent institutions, this Kimbunga, this Mali, you know, restoring and rehabilitating the U.S.A. This is why we're doing this, because it's Pan-Africanism or Paris for real. It's not just a slogan. And so, you know, that as well as having a solidarity plan. So we talked about the monitoring groups and having a solidarity plan. Can we touch at least the surface of that so we can give the people an ideal of what that would look like for us to have in place? We talked briefly also about the U.S.A. having these kind of things in place, the Black Panther Party having these kind of things in place, that generation after generation, you see these nationalist diplomatic relationships being made by the movement, not by the U.S. government, but by the African people within the United States, the African people within Jamaica, the African people within the context of the UK, using our own agency, using our own willpower to create the ability to counter everything that they throw at us. So if we can go into that conversation, the monitoring and the solidarity plan.
I got one thing on that. When Brother Sekou was on a show one time, he mentioned that somewhere in he's from Liberia, and but he mentioned somewhere else in West Africa that he was, and they had like a society of brothers, and traditionally they were like a security force for the nation. But he says, you know, since colonization, neo-colonization, you know, they've been used more or less as an exhibitionist type, you know, outfit. And he said that, you know, he was speaking to some of the elders, and he said, why can't these brothers be, you know, like retrained for their actual official role? And so when we see, you know, he was basically talking about AFRICOM and the so-called Islamist, quote unquote, militia groups, yeah? that those people are protecting the community from said forces. All over, let's just keep it confined to West Africa. There are societies, of men and women that still exist. You know what I'm saying? As brothers and sisters will know if you've been traveling to West Africa, right? And I would say the same for the Caribbean and the Americas in terms of our maroon communities. Now, man, I come from Jamaica, you know, so there's a whole heap of contradictions in the maroons that are becoming more and more you get me, established, as the days go by, especially when we begin to talk about Jamaica becoming a republic and getting rid of the monarch of England as head of state, and increasing its relationship with the United States of America and all of the dynamics that is concerned. But I'm saying that if we're educating and organizing among our people, that was the function of Maroons. They used to monitor the actions of the enemy, right? You know what I'm saying? And inform the people in the communities, the so-called Maroon communities, but also the people on the plantations. There was one of the secrets of our history is that there was a connection oftentimes between Africans in Maroon communities, so-called Maroon communities, and on plantations. So, you know, those are the two maybe far-fetched suggestions, but it suggests that if we are organized on a certain level, that we can employ those strategies. You know what I'm saying? I want to say one more thing about how important this is, and give people an understanding of some pan-European dynamics that are taking place within the last month. Britain was Britain still has a lot of what is called sovereign territory, in the world, usually in places that it used to colonize. The monarch of the country and the government still wield control over crown land and or sovereign territory. And one of the aspects of sovereign territory that the UK had up until recently was a place called the Chagos Islands, which is in what they call the Indian Ocean. And it's under the governance of Mauritius. All right. And so there's been a campaign for the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands for quite some time. And a return, either complete sovereignty for the Chagos Islands or return to jurisdiction under Mauritius completely. The UK government went into consultation with the Mauritian government recently to hand the Chagos Islands, which is about 60 islands, in the Indian Ocean, back to Mauritius. In the 1970s, upwards of 2,000 native residents of the Chagos Islands were forcibly evicted from the Chagos Islands for the sake of the US developing a military base in the Chagos Islands. Ever since then, the people of the Chagos Islands, who they call Chagosians, have been campaigning to return to the Chagos Islands. They've been given the right to do so now, even though they were not consulted about this deal in which Britain so-called surrendered its sovereignty over the Chagos Islands. This has caused big uproar in the United Kingdom. They have vowed to give back all but one of the islands. The one island that they're not going to give back is the biggest of the islands. And the reason why they're not giving back that island is because that island is going to remain a military base for the United States of America. And Britain secured that deal, with the Mauritian government, and made sure that their brothers and sisters in the United States of America were able to keep a whole island clear, the biggest island, for the sake of building and maintaining and growing a U.S. military presence in the Indian Ocean. That's some pan-European dynamics, right? In 2024, brothers and sisters.
Wow. Look at that. Look at that, man. Look at that. Thank you for that contribution, Brother Shakarad. You know, that just took it to a different depth of insight. But is there any more conversation concerning the monitoring groups and solidarity plan? I think that what Shakarad was saying is right on point in terms of reflecting on our historical reactions, our historical institutions, our historical practices, and try to restore them in modern day, because it's all about being informed. It's all about media. It's all about spreading the word. It's all about making sure people was on the one. They understand what's going on, and having that service provided. Not only we talk about education, we think about homeschools and children, but the whole African race, we all need to be re-educated. It's a adult education as well that needs to be facilitated. So of course, like I said, this is Jicho La Kimbunga. We are the whirlwind, the eye of the whirlwind. And so that's the kind of analysis you can always expect from us in this particular group. I wanna open the mic for everyone to have any last statements before we close up.
Peace. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off of what Shakara was saying. I think, in terms of how the Maroons moved and how we used to move in the Caribbean, communication is key. And I think, it's important that we also have our agents, our people that's out there monitoring and paying attention to what's going on. And I think, it's important that we build our own communications network. So in terms of what we need, I think we need more people in IT. I think we need more people that's educated on cybersecurity, that's educated on infrastructure. And I think our people need to understand what that is, because right now, we're deeply plugged into the system, and I don't think we understand how deep it goes. Even right now with the platform we're using here, we're still utilizing their tools. And I think that's something that is unprecedented. It wasn't like that before. We had our own means of communicating with each other. And I really think that that's probably the most important thing that we need to focus on. If we're going to have any kind of conversations of sovereignty, we need to be able to control our communications.
Yeah, I agree, brother. And that's where organization comes in. That's where the organization comes in. Yes, we have media, but we need organization on the ground. We need organization in the communities. When you read the autobiography of Malcolm X and you see how his father was passing the message of Garveyism, when you read these autobiographies, you understand they was in the living rooms, and on Sunday they was preaching. But on Wednesday, they was talking Garvey. They was talking back to Africa. And Malcolm was young, but he realized the difference. Like, yo, Daddy be preaching on Sunday, and he be talking about Garvey and Black Power on Wednesday. And we got to bring back that vibration. We really got to take the struggle back home. The struggle been in the streets for a long time, but it really is about restoring institutions, and the primary institution to restore is the home. We used to do everything at home. Offline, like this brother was saying, man, like the organization, the local, the grassroots organization, that's what is really, really, really amounted to. It's the grassroots that need to come in contact with this media. It's the grassroots that need to come in contact with these programs and these platforms. Those are the minds that we're after. It's the grassroots, the masses of the people. So there has to be media, but there also has to be organization, media organization. And when you see how even it was an economic vehicle, if you look at the Negro World, you look at Muhammad Speaks, you look at the Black Panther newspaper, these were economic vehicles. These were ways that the people had seized their own analysis and took political sovereignty into their own control and did their thing to make sure that their people knew what was up. Same thing need to happen. We just need to overwhelm the system, because believe it or not, this internet has a lot of people out of touch with their own humanity. Socially, many people are confused. A lot of these young bucks growing up, they're socially awkward. They're socially handicapped. They wouldn't know what to do in a group of people, intellectualizing around a circle. It might seem boring or crazy or completely strange to them. But we have to bring that vibe back. I'm always talking about that, man. Whatever your skill is, go to a park in the hood and start issuing it out for free. If you cut hair, go cut a couple free heads every week. If you do karate, go give some free lessons to the kids. Do whatever you can do to bring the vibration of communityism back. We talk about U.S.A, but there's also an African Communities League. There's a League of African Communities that is that needs to be formed out of this government. It is not just, oh, we're Garveyites, oh yeah, our politics is correct, RBG, red, black, green. No, it has to solve the problems of the people in the communities and in the homes where it's needed at. Or we're just perpetuating the BS that, other people are doing. So I want to throw that out there as well, man. We're talking the media, but we need grassroots community organizations that can tap into the minds of our people and set them free. Set them free. Because information, literally, I believe that most of our people are intelligent enough to, if they get the information delivered to them in the right way, you can unlock that. You can unlock that mental slavery. We can reverse this mental side. And if that ain't happening, we don't stand a chance as a people globally. Indeed. So organization is key. It's all about that. PG, you got any last words for us, PG? Your mic is on. You're mute.
There you go.
Okay.
Yes, all of what has been said, I think, is extremely positive. Building a governmental structure in order to build institutions is important. Building the grassroots engagement should also come from things that work through a governmental structure to get people to understand. Yes, we need our own platform. I also agree with the young brother about having more people deal with cybersecurity. But at the same time, I think we have to do what you just said. Build it from the grassroots up. Institutions, as our young warrior Sam P.K. Collins said, is essential. At one point, we did that. It's time to go back to that. It's time not to just to build institutions for elementary school, but for colleges and universities. It's time to raise the stakes and raise the game, because what we're dealing with is an enemy that is working diligently to raise the stakes, raise the game, and change the platform upon which we are operating. Working to build one Africa is essential. Building a community structure is also critical. And getting more people to even come to and listen to what we're saying as a means of teasing their mind, to get them engaged, to get them to study. We got to read more, strangely enough. So yes, we have to do this engagement. And this is the platform we have. This is the platform we use. We just got to keep using it. We won't give up. We will not. I said.
Brother Sam P.K. Collins, the master teacher. Yeah, man.
In wrapping this up, I do have to, I don't mean to burst anybody's bubble, but uniting Africa is a very insurmountable, I'm not going to say insurmountable, it's a gargantuan task in the sense that Africa is ethnically diverse, politically diverse, and there's some resources on the ground that are direly needed. You visit. I often talk to my wife about this. Like, it feels like, and Chief, you can speak to this. When you travel to the continent, you can't go for a week. You got to go for like a month at least, because a day is like 3 weeks out there. Like, it's so slow, and not like slow in a bad way, but more like ancient back home slow. So you really got to take time to get settled and come in there and I say all of that to make the point that we have to establish trust among one another. We got to learn to navigate these systems. We got to learn to and I don't like using the word romanticize, but we gotta be operational. I just want to shout out Brother Shakara for having that reasoning some months back about operationalizing Garveyism, or just how that looks. I think that as we continue to be scientific and we do trial and error, and I do see RC 2020 definitely gaining a foothold on the continent as well. I'm not going to speak too much to that, but I do envision seeing that continue, because that is direly needed, as we continue to expand and, just do things in the grassroots. It's all about educating people, and it's all about, again, building institutions. I see a brother in there talking about defining what's an African. I definitely think that's a very, very crucial discussion to have, but especially on the continent, because Black to some people is not even a thing, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'll stop by saying that this has probably been, out of the 3 that we had so far, one of the best ones. I don't know. I just think the whole international thing really got people going, and I'm just very, very pleased to be in this collective, y'all.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Sam.
So real quickly, I don't know what lineup we are. I had to make a run, but let me just say, for all the listeners out there. Spiritually, we are the first.
Sorry, Baba, just to say it's closing statement, so feel free to make your closing.
Yeah. This is a closing statement, bro. So this is a closing statement. I got you, Shaka Rock. But I just want to give some hope to our people, to let them know that we're gonna win. So don't think we're not gonna win. The question is when we're gonna win and how we tie into the whirlwind. And we got to tap into our spiritual power and manifest that spiritual power into some practical action on the ground. So I just want to give people hope, though. And I know they heard a lot of things that can kind of be discouraging, but the fact of the matter is we're going to win. And the question is how soon? So wake up, everybody. Get connected to some kind of organized power. I really appreciate Sam. I appreciate Shakara. I appreciate Chief Fode. I appreciate PG, Keely and Kruma. My brother. We connected. We connected. And it's not just about the UNIA. It's about the African race. In fact, the UNIA has always been about the African race. And I also say the PAFM and all the institutions need to close ranks and quit playing with this thing. The critical mass will follow us once we take control of our sovereignty, food, clothing, and shelter. And we got to do it. And we've been warred on. We got to get offensive in the war. So I'll just leave on that point. Say one God, one aim, one destiny, one Africa.
One Africa. I say. You know, we need a clear agenda, y'all. It's obvious. I mean, every time we have these conversations, there's just more that we need to develop our own policy and our own agenda around, our own strategy around. So, you know, I thank everybody who participated in this particular roundtable and all the other ones as well. We plan to continue doing this for those out there. This is not just a one-time or two-time thing. We'll continue to do it. And, you know, also I've seen in the comments around the race and the Africa thing too. Maybe we need to do a future roundtable on the question of African identity in the 21st century, because it seems to change every generation, and we need to make sure that our people understand what we're talking about. You know, because if Africa is not free, the world don't stand a chance, and that's just the reality of it. It's bigger than even us. You know, this work is hard as hell to do. And there's only a few of us out here riding, really. And so I just wanted to say, you know, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. One God, one aim, one destiny, one Africa. That's what this is about. All right, y'all. So with no further ado, we'll close out for this time, and we'll be back soon with another one. Hot topic. Y'all tune in.
I like that. I say.
Why are we all of a sudden having crisis in identity? At the very moment, we also talked about what? Afrocentrism and African centeredness. So right at this moment, when we are beginning to coalesce and to develop a concept of African identity and Afrocentrism, we are all now suddenly in a identity crisis. Is the identity crisis really there, or is what going on an attempt to do what? Create an identity crisis? Because these people are well aware of what a full and wholesome identity will do to them, and they are aware that an African-centered identity represents the end of white power and of white oppression.